fans of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are waiting to get their fill of the next adventure in Westeros, and they're going to get it in 2025 with Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But there may be another series coming out that is closer to Game of Thrones, and we're going to get into what that series is right now on the Sundowners Club. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Happy 2025. And we've got a new series to talk about today. And Sterling, my co-host, we watched House of the Dragon season 2, and it was a little lackluster, mainly for the way the season ended going into season 3. And fans want battles. They want political intrigue. They want to fight for the throne, the things that we've become used to with watching Game of Thrones on television. And House of the Dragon has given us a little bit of a feel of that. But with the new show coming out, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, people that are expecting to get something similar to that, I think are going to be disappointed just because the show is very different. And while that is debuting in 2025, it's based on the stories of the novellas of Duncan Egg and The Hedge Knight. We have another series coming out that I think could possibly be something that is closer to Game of Thrones than anything we've gotten before or since on television and streaming. And it's called King and Conquer. And I want to talk about, one, we're going to show some images that have just been released of the series that's going to be releasing initially on the BBC or BBC One, and then it's going to come in the States by way of Paramount Plus or Paramount this year. And James Norton, the actor, is also producing and starring in it. But first, let's talk about Night of the Seven Kingdoms. And you and I have talked about that show's going to be very different from Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. And with this new series, King and Conquer, what do you think about that storyline being more closely resembling what we might expect to see from something like a Game of Thrones or that type of medieval content?
Well, this is based off actual history,
real history.
Yeah. So, the only thing that concerns me, it is on BBC, so you have to be very careful on getting too excited about anything because their casting choices have been awful in the past on certain things. They've ruined shows right off the bat with their casting. So far, though, this looks good from what we can tell. We've got it is based off actual history, so hopefully they'll cast accurately.
So let's talk real quick about the history. We'll keep it brief for those that don't know. There was King Harold. He went by Harold II of Wessex, and leading up to 1066, he was the king, the last Anglo-Saxon king of Brittany or England, and he was defeated on the battlefield by William of Normandy, who became known as William the Conqueror. And the conquest of 1066, which gave us the empire of England that we have today, and things like the Tower of London and all the line of kings and queens that came after William of Normandy. It's a fantastic story, and William himself is going to be played by Jaime Lannister himself from Game of Thrones. And so I think that's great casting. And then we have James Norton, who's playing King Harold. James Norton was originally wanting to play the role of William of Normandy, but he had a contract with HBO at the time where they didn't want him to commit to multiple seasons, so they wanted his character to die or to not have multiple season commitments. So he took on the role of King Harold. And so it's based on the two powers of William of Normandy and King Harold and the fight for the throne and the intrigue that comes from that. And so that's the history that it's based on. And so we do have some images, and we'll get into that. But let's look at the casting first of all. So you've got James Norton as King Harold. You've got Nicola Coster-Waldau as William of Normandy. aka he played Jamie Lannister in Game of Thrones. You've got Clements Posey and Juliet Stevenson and Emily Beecham. So we've got really good actresses playing the prospective wives of William of Normandy and Harold, and then you've got an interesting character that we've seen also in Game of Thrones, and that is someone who's going to be playing William's right hand man Fitzaburn, and that's Joseph Maul, who played Benjen Stark in Game of Thrones. And so I think that's great casting. He's done other roles in other projects where maybe you didn't notice that it was him, but he was really great in a limited role as Benjen Stark, and I think he's going to be really great in this role as well. But another thing to look at is they filmed it in Iceland, and so we're going to go through some of these images here, but let's start with the first one, which is Harold on the throne. You have the crosses on the back of the throne chair. You have the crown that will show that has the crosses making up the crown, and looks very authentic and historically accurate. So that first image, I think, is a very good one. You can also see that there's a little bit of a dark tones to some of the interior shots, which I think is kind of cool. And so this first shot, I mean, does anything jump out at you with James Norton in the first shot of him as Harold?
No, I mean, from all the pictures that I've seen, it looks like authenticity is important to them. I mean, they did a great job with like the sets and the costumes and all that. It definitely looks like a big budget production. So I mean, just in terms of just at first glance looking at it, everything looks pretty high quality.
Yeah, and then we have the next shot is Harold again with a crown on, but he's on. It looks like he's headed towards a battlefield, but he's got soldiers behind him, look disheveled, and he looks like he's been through it a little bit. But you see, that armor that he's wearing, the kind of in the style of the Starks of Winterfell. So it's kind of got that style to it, which I think looks really cool. And then we get our first shot of Jamie Lannister himself playing William of Normandy. And this shot of William with the sword in hand, walking up on the beach, he's just, gotten off a boat. And it looks a lot like Game of Thrones, right? Every time you saw Jon Snow or someone get off a boat on the shores of Dragonstone or, coming near King's Landing, they were always arriving on these little boats and coming from the larger ships. And so that first shot is very reminiscent of Game of Thrones. But obviously he looks a little different. He's got the mustache and, his face is disheveled, but he doesn't have a full beard and he's got short hair, which is also somewhat accurate historically because the English talked about the Normans as looking like monks with shaved beards or shaved faces and short hair, and so there's reference for that. But a great shot of Nicola Costa-Waldau. Do you think what do you think about his casting as William of Normandy?
I think that's great. I mean, I thought he was amazing in Game of Thrones, and you really don't see him in much, at least not that I've seen. I know he's had some other things he's been in, but
From the start of Game of Thrones to the end, he was great.
yeah, he really was. I think he's underutilized as an actor. But I don't know. Some of these, there hasn't really been anybody that's had a huge career after the show, honestly, that I can think of.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. A lot of them have gotten work, but not anything that's really. I mean, Amelia Clark maybe.
She was in a few things, but they didn't really pan out that well.
None of them done well. But
I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people get typecasted in this type of stuff. But
hey, this is a good thing to be typecast in. I mean, he's the one guy or the one actor that has done a project similar to Game of Thrones. Like, it's in medieval times, right? So
I'd also heard like he was really good at the sword fight scenes and stuff like that.
So this next shot, I love it because you could see the filming in Iceland, but you could see the rock and the cinematography of that shot. And what I like, I look for things like authenticity. I like the fact that they have the long, historically accurate shields, and then you see what looks like the two lions that is the sigil of William. on the shield, one above and one below. And so I think that that bodes well for making this look authentic and brutal, which is what would have happened back then. So I definitely love this shot. These first few shots all remind me of like early season Game of Thrones when you're near Winterfell and you're in the Reach and you're in areas around Westeros where you see this type of terrain. And Iceland's a great place to shoot. And then we have our next shot, which looks like it could be the character Matilda, but it's inside a castle, obviously, and they're pouring drinks. They're sitting at the table, eating, and so obviously, you can't have a story like this without a lot of political intrigue. And what are the roles of the wives within this power vacuum? And so I think this looks authentic there. I'm looking at the costumes and again the kind of dimly lit the lighting of the shots, right? It reminds me of some of the interior shots that we saw that we still see on House of the Dragon. Where there's it's not like they have good lighting back in those days or medieval times. So it seems authentic to me. What do you think?
No, I agree. So far, like I said, only thing I'd be concerned about is casting if it's BBC. But so far, everything looks good. So
All the casting that we've seen so far looks good. And then we have a shot we'll put up of Harold on the battlefield. I don't know if it's the Battle of Hastings in this particular shot. It looks like, maybe I don't know if it's a smaller skirmish, but looks like maybe 50 people behind him, but he's got the crown on the helmet, and that's Harold. So interesting shot there, but you know we'll see how the battles look. I mean the battles are going to shape what happens with this. And
what
let me
is this? Is this a mini series or like a movie?
It's an 8 episode limited series or mini series. So
So
I don't know
one,
if it'll
so
have a season
one,
two.
probably one season. Okay.
Probably. So the next shot we have is three characters sitting inside a castle at the table. Again, I think the politics and the intrigue around what made Harold and William end up squaring off with each other for the throne as unlikely as it was because they started out as allies. I think they're going to cover quite a bit of that in this series, and so I think this is one of those shots where these supporting characters play a role in the happenings that end up becoming what we know now historically as the Battle of Hastings. And then we have a shot of what looks to be the Pope binding Harold and William together. Again, I mentioned they were allies before they were enemies and unlikely enemies. And so the story will go into that and what happens that ends up placing them on the battlefield opposite of each other. But again, when you get into the medieval Europe and Britain, the papal influence was very strong back then. Popes were much more like emperors, so they wielded a lot of power, and we saw that all the way up through modern times. And so I think that this is going to be a play here with what happens with Norton's character and Nicola's character in the story. But and that's our final shot. But overall, we've got King and Conqueror coming out. All we have right now is images. We don't have a trailer, but it should be coming soon with the series coming out this year. I know we don't trust the BBC, but what we've seen so far, the casting and these images, I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I
I
mean-
love anything historically. I mean, what do you think?
It looks like they're staying authentic to the time and casting accurately as well so far. So, I mean, yeah, so far so good. And I always love stuff like this. So, I mean, hopefully they're going to have to go all out on the budget to make the battle scenes good. That's one thing you got to worry about. Stuff like this, sometimes they cheap out. And,
Right.
that's one of the things that made Game of Thrones special. And the battle scenes, especially in the later seasons, were outstanding. Even Vikings. I mean, that was a good show too. The battle scenes weren't quite on
The
par.
first
with
few
Game of
seasons
Thrones, but
of Vikings was good, and then I think at some point it kind of I think it kind of lost its way a little bit. I mean, when Ragnar died, and so, but I think This is going to be.
I hope it will at least be on that level.
Yeah,
Right.
if it's like the first few seasons of Vikings, I love it. But this is going to be more grand in scale in terms of like, you know, the historical aspect of it. One thing before we go that we didn't mention is that this series was written by Michael Robert Johnson, who wrote Sherlock Holmes. That's
Okay.
another good sign
Yeah, they got good people
for
behind
the
it.
series.
Yeah.
So, this is one that I wanted to mention this. I wanted to talk about this for our audience. We cover a lot of Westeros-based content, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, now Night of the Seven Kingdoms, what we believe is going to end up being Aegon's Conquest coming out. There's also going to be a movie based in Westeros that I believe is probably going to have something to do with the Doom of Valyria. So there's a lot coming out. You know what's not coming out?
You're not getting any books, so just
Not getting Winds of Winter.
watch the shows.
So we have to fill the void somehow,
All right.
and a historical series around William of Normandy, where we see Jaime Lannister again, but in a different role. Benjen Stark again, but in a different role. I'm excited for it. Let me know what you think. If you're excited for King and Conqueror, if you live in England and you're going to see it on the BBC One, or if you're in the States and you're going to watch it on Paramount Plus, let us know what you think. We're going to be here to cover it when the first trailer comes out. Are you looking forward to this? Or are you more looking forward to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms that will take place on HBO and Max this year? Usually they release those things around late summer, early fall is what we're hearing right now. Let us know what you think. And while you're doing that, make sure to share this video out to your friends. Smash that like button, leave us a comment, and most importantly, hit subscribe so we can continue to grow our channel. And TCB.